Greetings, everyone. My name is Florence Denens-Habeck, Prime Vigilance Head of Marketing, and I will be your host to share a couple of words about Prime Vigilance. Prime Vigilance is an ergomed company and a leading pharmacovigilance full-service provider, delivering global solutions for both clinical trial safety as well as post-marketing pharmacovigilance and medical information. We are glad you could join us today for our Advanced Learning Pharmacovigilance webinar series. This webinar series aims for our experts to present and provide our listener with a good understanding of the main pharmacovigilance principle and help our listeners to acquire the necessary knowledge to set up a compliant pharmacovigilance system. Today's webinar is titled Pharmacovigilance Agreement Guidance. Before we commence, I'd like to run through a couple of quick housekeeping matters. Firstly, we expect this webinar presentation to run for approximately 40 to 45 minutes, with a short amount of time for question and answer at the end. And secondly, you are very welcome to send us your questions at any point through the presentation. You can do so by typing them into the Q&A section available on your screen. And now I'd like to introduce you to our expert speakers, Dr. Marcella Fialova, Prime Vigilance Senior Director, EU QPPV, UK QPPV. Marcella is a pharmacovigilance professional with more than 20 years of experience in the pharmaceutical industry. Dr. Jana Yankova, Prime Vigilance Director, EU QPPV, UK QPPV. Jana is an expert in pharmacovigilance with more than 15 years experience working for several global pharma companies. I will now let our expert speaker take over from here.
Thank you, Flo. Good morning, everyone. My name is Marcela Fialova, and let me start today's webinar with the overview of topics we will cover today. At the beginning, we will quickly check the legislative framework around pharmacovigilance agreements. Then we will spend some time on general description of pharmacovigilance agreement lifecycle. Afterwards, Jana will focus on different types of pharmacovigilance agreements and will deep dive into the areas and related responsibilities which form the individual SDA. And at the end, Jana will explain how PV agreements should be described and presented in PSMF. So let me jump into legislative background. First of all, there is Regulation 726/2004 laying down community procedures for the authorization and supervision of medicinal products for human and veterinary use and establishing a European Medicine Agency. Then there is Commission Implementing Regulation 520 from 2012 on the performance of pharmacovigilance activities. Then there is Directive 2001/83 of the Community Code relating to medicinal products for human use. Apart from these pieces of legislation, there is also GVP, as well as local guidelines and company procedures. All these guidance specify the conditions for subcontraction or delegation of pharmacovigilance activities, as well as define the responsibilities of individual parties. In any event, in case of delegating or subcontracting, the party which delegates any activity needs to make any effort to ensure the quality of services. This may be achieved through a regular audit program, key performance indicator setting, or compliance monitoring. And last but not least, all these legislation requires that the pharmacovigilance agreement are listed in PSMF. GVP Module 1 on pharmacovigilance systems says that if marketing authorization holder subcontract certain activities of the pharmacovigilance system to third party, this is possible. Marketing authorization holder may do it, may subcontract to another organization or a person, which means that marketing authorization holder may, for example, subcontract only EU QPPV. Holder shall nevertheless retain full responsibility for the completeness and accuracy of the pharmacovigilance system master file. And the most important bullet point here is that the ultimate responsibility for the fulfillment of all pharmacovigilance tasks and responsibilities and the quality and integrity of the pharmacovigilance system always remains with the marketing authorization holder. There are always at least two parties in the contract, sometimes even more. So let's focus on the simplest scenario of agreement between marketing authorization holder and the other party. And let me start with points marketing authorization holder needs to have in mind. As set in implementing regulation 520, when subcontracting tasks to another organization, the marketing authorization holder shall draw up subcontracts, and these should be detailed, up-to-date, and clearly document the contractual arrangements between the marketing authorization holder and the other organization, describing arrangements for delegation and the responsibilities of each party. When preparing contractual arrangements, the marketing authorization holder should include sufficiently detailed descriptions of the delegated tasks, the related interactions and data exchange, together with, for example, agreed definitions, tools, assignments, and timelines. The PV agreement should also contain clear information on the practical management of pharmacovigilance, like the way, format, and timelines for exchange of information, as well as related processes. Contractual arrangements should be prepared with the aim of enabling compliance with the legal requirements by each party involved. Further, marketing authorization holder should ensure that effective quality system is applied to subcontracted tasks and should indicate which processes are in place for checking whether the agreed arrangements are being adhered to. In this respect, regular risk-based audits of the other organization by the marketing authorization holder or introduction of other methods of control and assessment are recommended. And as mentioned before, and as Jana will detail further, any delegation of pharmacovigilance activities needs to be presented in PSMF. So let's have a look from the point of view of the other party, from the point of view of other organization acting as subcontractor. This party is obliged to follow all guidance provided in GVP. Subcontractor needs to adhere to the agreement and needs to keep in mind that they may be subject to an inspection of the competent authority in the relevant member state. However, we always need to have in mind that marketing authorization holder still retains the responsibility for PV system, for fulfillment of PV obligations, for quality and integrity of the PV system, and for effective system of quality and compliance monitoring. So let me now briefly guide you through the pharmacovigilance agreement lifecycle. First of all, there must be sufficient level of pharmacovigilance awareness in the company. Simply, people in the organization need to know that there is pharmacovigilance, and they need to understand that at some instances, there may be a need to check with pharmacovigilance department if PV agreement is needed. Once this is clear, we move to agreement preparation and negotiation, and afterwards to its implementation into daily pharmacovigilance practice. After initial implementation, we are not done. We need to maintain pharmacovigilance agreement up to date and introduce changes if needed. And lastly, once the time comes, we need to terminate the agreement. Instead of having the not applicable, non-valid or expired PV agreement in our records, and in PSMF. So let's have a look on each of these steps. First of all, pharmacovigilance awareness. Let's list the most relevant internal partners involved in pharmacovigilance agreements. First of all, regulatory department. The department which holds the important information about type of registration, marketing authorization holders involved, any local partners. Sometimes regulatory department keeps track of compassionate use programs or any other programs sponsored by the holder. Then there is legal department. This department usually prepares pharmacovigilance agreement templates, prepares the review of the SDA, also may help us to decide if we need just clause in the master agreement or if we need a standalone pharmacovigilance agreement. And also they may have a rule in which situations the global or local pharmacovigilance agreement is applicable. Then there is commercial department. Apparently, this department has many partners. They are dealing with licensing in, licensing out. So having a good relationship with commercial department for pharmacovigilance is, in my eyes, crucial. Then there is medical affairs. This department may initiate organized data collection, market research programs, or patient support programs. And again, pharmacovigilance needs to be informed about all of these. And last of key stakeholders is clinical department, having awareness of clinical trials or any co-development programs and sometimes post-authorization safety studies as well. The next step is preparation and negotiation, where firstly we need to agree who leads the preparation from each party, who is the main contact point. We need to accept that there will be different experience on both sides and there will be different expectations and different preferences. And for sure, there may be different internal structures, so the title of position in one company may not be the same as the title of the person collaborating from the other side. We need to agree which template will be used, if this will be the template from marketing authorization holder or the template from the partner, or if there will be any other layout used. During the pharmacovigilance agreement negotiations, we need to accept, as I have said, different expectations and requests. Both sides may be able to exchange data in different format. We need to do our best to achieve clarity and completeness in the processes described. What is really very much recommended is responsibility metrics, just tables saying who is doing what. Then we need to be aware that there may be activities which are not described in pharmacovigilance agreement, which means they are simply not delegated. They still remain with marketing authorization holder. And very important part of any agreement are contact details. Also, this is just a date. The date of effectiveness is a crucial decision-making point, like changing our future processes. So this needs to be clearly stated in the agreement and very well communicated internally. And this leads us to the next step, which is implementation, which means that we first of all need to inform the personnel about the pharmacovigilance agreement. In many cases, email will suffice, but sometimes we would need to have really PV agreement training where we describe what are the roles of individual partners, what is the portfolio affected, what are the responsibilities in individual chapters, what is the safety data exchange, what is the type of information exchange, format, timelines, any details about reconciliation, compliance monitoring or audits, also agreement review cycle. Then we need to implement into the daily routine pharmacovigilance practice, which goes hand in hand with update of internal records and trackers, and also update of PSMF, which will be covered by Jana in a minute. When we have the contract finalized, it's not end of the story. We need to maintain that. We need to regularly review it to ensure the compliance with current legislation or compliance with overall pharmacovigilance setup and needs and expectations of both partners. Usually, there is a review cycle already agreed, and the agreement requires communication of any changes to other party. However, regular review is also a good opportunity to check all key aspects of the SDA. For example, do we still need certain chapter? Do we need to add other chapter? And also to see how many changes were done in between and if there is a need for a preparation of updated, consolidated version. Indeed, anything can change. It is preferred to use general contact details instead of concrete people's names and personal email addresses. However, in some cases, the individual person needs to be listed anyway, for example, QPPV. Also, legislation requirements may change. Just remember how much Brexit impacted pharmacovigilance a few months ago. But it does not need to be a change in legislation. It may be only natural evolvement of portfolio or country coverage. The agreement itself states how changes should be communicated. Certain changes are just announced, typically the changes in contact details. However, some need to be negotiated. For example, changes in timelines, addition or exclusion of certain chapters, change in format of exchange data. It is recommended to have all changes in writing and define in SDA when the change requires signatures of both parties and when simple announcement and acknowledgement is sufficient. Termination of pharmacovigilance agreement is the last step in pharmacovigilance agreement life cycle. Sometimes the way or conditions for termination are already stated in the pharmacovigilance agreement. For example, if the agreement was prepared as an extension of master service agreement, then the SDA expires automatically upon termination of the master agreement between the partners. Usually, termination may be initiated by any party with a written termination notice delivered to the other party. Termination itself is followed by the same steps as implementation, just backwards. Instead of implementation, team must be informed about termination. The processes set up with respect to SDA will need to be excluded, and this termination of PV activities should be recorded, and for sure the terminated SDA should not be listed anymore in PSMF. So in a nutshell, the internal PV awareness and communication is crucial for the setup of all PV agreements. PV department and QPPV need to be informed about any new partner or agreement where any PV obligations may be applicable. Sometimes QPPV is not mandatory signatory of PV agreement. Then the system must be in place, ensuring that QPPV is informed about sign-off, date of effectiveness, and about any changes to the agreement and about termination of the agreement itself or the master service agreement. So that concludes the pharmacovigilance agreement life cycle. And now Jana will deep dive into the agreement itself.
Thank you, Marcela. So let's go into a review of different types of PV agreements. You will see that most probably I will repeat what Marcela already said, but I believe that it's going to be useful for you because I'm going to talk about this from a different perspective. So let's look when and how we should conclude a pharmacovigilance agreement. Of course, in the agreements and in the life cycle of a product and with our partners, we have to be sure that we are able to decide if there should be no pharmacovigilance agreement between parties, or if we should conclude some sort of limited pharmacovigilance agreement, for example, just to describe safety data collection and exchange, training and audit. Let's say that this is the basic limited PV agreement, up to a complex description of pharmacovigilance and pharmacovigilance agreement, where we will cover safety data collection and exchange, training, auditing, but moreover, also description of PV system, EU QPPV role, PCR or other aggregate report creation, literature search responsibilities, signal management and risk management, who will cover or which party will cover SMPC, other labels, which party will cover communication with regulatory agencies and reconciliation. So, how does it look like? We have to think about type of the agreement. We might have standalone document, which is gonna be either detailed, as I already mentioned, describing a lot of activities and responsibilities, or we might have a standalone document, which is gonna be limited, just speaking about no regular exchange, just the most important safety information or safety relevant information will be exchanged. And this is standalone document. On the other hand, we might have also just a section or clause in the main agreement. It might be, for example, license agreement or distribution agreement, or it can be also contract for quality assurance, etc. You can probably imagine types of agreements into which we can just have a few paragraphs talking about pharmacovigilance settings and data exchange. So let's talk about types of PV agreements. We can have safety data exchange agreement between two marketing authorization holders. So it means that we have two equal marketing authorization holders, and we will decide who will be responsible for what, because some activities are going to be shared. Then we might have safety data exchange agreement between marketing authorization holder and PV service provider. I would say that we can call it also like coverage of affiliate responsibilities. This is the most common setting within a pharmacovigilance world. That, for example, there is a marketing authorization holder not having an affiliate in a certain area. So then they will get a service provider that would cover, let's say, all affiliate activities, including pharmacovigilance. So they would cover local safety person, including data collection, etc. Then more simple agreement is safety data exchange agreement between a marketing authorization holder and a distributor or manufacturer. So in this way, it will be, let's say, pure distribution in a way that we will have to describe how the data are going to be collected. And this is similar also for manufacturer. the marketing authorization holder should get information from the distributor and manufacturer. Then, as we may know, pharmacovigilance data transfer agreement is also one of types of agreements. It means that we should get all information, all safety data from the previous marketing authorization holder. And of course, there might be combination of pharmacovigilance data transfer agreement together with any other type of agreements, as you can see here. And as Marcela already mentioned, there should be also safety data exchange agreement termination in case that it is not already specified in the PV agreement or the main business agreement. Let's look at the same from different perspective. We can look at this as, again, we have two marketing authorization holders, and it can be license in or license out setting. Here, it might be shared registration procedure, either DCP or MRP, and you will transfer PV obligations. It can be change of the marketing authorization holder, or it can be distribution. So there is marketing authorization holder and a distributor. Then we might have also co-marketing and co-promotion, which I didn't mention in the previous slide. But these are partners that for co-marketing, each partner will sell the same product under another brand, or it might be co-promotion, where they are using a sales network partner. Then talking about pre-marketing, we are talking about sponsors. It can be co-development agreement, and as I already mentioned, so PV service provider. I think that this slide is pretty common and very widely used for people. So I just wanted to put both slides here just to see the different perspective. Let's look and dive deeply into responsibilities. So which are key items of PV agreement? So we should definitely mention contractual parties and specify their roles. So it means who is the marketing authorization holder, who is the distributor or other marketing authorization holder, what is their relationship. Then the crucial thing is reference to master agreement. Of course, here we are talking about a separate pharmacovigilance agreement. And we should always know the master agreement, at least some sort of settings. As Marcela already mentioned, we need to understand who is the marketing authorization holder. We need to understand portfolio, territory. So that's what we should know from the master agreement, or we can call it principal agreement. However we can call this agreement. So we should always have relevant parts of this agreement to be able to set up a pharmacovigilance agreement. Products and territories should be in line with the principal agreement. And what is sometimes tricky thing is that people are using not legal terms in pharmacovigilance agreements. For example, its territory. This is not really legal term. So if we are concluding a PV agreement, let's keep legal terminology as already said in the master agreement. Of course, we need to know contacts from our partner. And then, as we already talked about it, delegated PV activities. And there might be many of them. Who is a global database holder, how about the PV system and EU QPPV is set, signal detection and risk management, literature, safety data collection, which type of data should be exchanged, then aggregate reports responsibility, reference safety information and other labeling, safety queries from competent authorities, reporting of action taken for safety reasons, etc. We already mentioned it in the previous sections. Then we shouldn't forget about verification of compliance. Then very important thing is also to involve into PV agreement, anti-bribery provisions. So these sections are typically sections that are somehow, let's say, supervised by a legal department, like anti-bribery provisions, confidentiality, data privacy, language of communication. And regarding language, it might be really tricky. It happened to me that we had a partner who refused to translate legislation. And the partner said, okay, in the agreement, there is that exchange of data should be in English, but not exchange of legislation or information about legislation. So just be precise on how you write what should be communicated in English. It might be really a tricky part. Then resource management and training, how and what the other party can subcontract, and of course applicable law, and archiving, how to archive. Then for sure we have to have a section that would describe auditing, then duration and term of the agreement, review cycle. So you can see that these sections as miscellaneous and duration and term of agreement, these are gonna be typically reviewed by legal, as well as the parts on the principal agreement, the products territory. So these are sections that are typically supervised by legal and commented very often by legal. Then, of course, we should have contact details of both parties. We should know how to monitor compliance and how to share management of deviation. And then, as Marcela mentioned, effective date and signature of authorized persons, and typical sections like definitions, abbreviations, and different annexes. It depends on how and what you agree with your partner that it should be in annex. Typically, it might be a forum for data exchange. Who is legally responsible for pharmacovigilance? And again, you already heard this from Marcela. So I would like to underline that marketing authorization holder is always responsible for post-marketing phase for marketed products. For pre-marketing, of course, obviously, this is a study sponsor. So general rule is that tasks can be outsourced, transferred, but ultimate pharmacovigilance responsibility can't be transferred and always lies with the marketing authorization holder or study sponsor for pre-marketing or pre-registration phase. Okay, so let's move to PV agreements in pharmacovigilance system master file. And here, I'm not gonna talk much more than you can find in module 2. So what is in GVP module 2? And this is section 2B for 2. PSMF section on the organizational structure of the marketing authorization holder. So the links with other organizations, such as co-marketing agreements and contracting of pharmacovigilance activities, should be outlined. A description of the location and nature of contracts and agreements relating to the fulfillment of pharmacovigilance obligations should be provided. This may be in the form of a list table to show the parties involved, the roles undertaken, and the concerned products and territories. And there is a description how to organize this list. So according to service providers, commercial agreements, and other technical providers. So you can see that there should be certain sections describing certain service providers and like providers of certain activities. Individual contractual agreements shall be made available at the request of national competent authorities and the agency or during inspection and audit, and the list provided in the annexes. So again, this should be presented in Annex B. So that's everything about PSMF from my end. So I believe that you got information on legislative background. You got introduction to the legislative background. You got description of the PV agreement life cycle, overview of different types of PV agreements from different perspectives. We also looked deeply into the responsibilities in a PV agreement and how about how to describe PV agreements in pharmacovigilance system master file. So that's everything from my side. So Flo, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Marcella and Jana, for a very informative presentation. In the meantime, we have received a few questions to answer. Let's try to answer a couple of them now while we'll still have a bit of time. Our first question will be, where I can find template for safety agreement? Who would like to answer this question?
Yeah, hi, Flo, Marcella. I think I may cover this one. Unfortunately, there is no general template for safety agreement. Regarding the most important chapters, and as presented today, I can recommend to cover all critical pharmacovigilance processes as described in GVP Module 1. And also, you may get inspired in PSMF structure as presented in GVP Module 2, because PV agreement is in fact interface between marketing authorization holder's PV system and the other partner. And also each company needs a slightly different template based on the situation they need to cover. There may be companies dealing mostly with in-licensing, out-licensing, or companies dealing mainly with local partners, acting as holders locally when the company itself does not have a local presence. For example, during registration process, or companies which need to set up the rules for safety flow in various post-marketing programs. So the list may be endless, but there is no official general template available.
Thank you, Marcella. We have time for one more question, and our next question for expert will be, if there are two MHAS, do they need to have PV agreement? Who would like to take this question?
Okay, Flo. I can answer this one. Firstly, thank you very much for the question, because this is really a tricky one. If we have two marketing authorization holders, so especially for common procedure as DCP or MRP procedure, where we have different marketing authorization holders. So I would think that there should be a pharmacovigilance agreement. However, there is no legislative background that can force two marketing authorization holders that they have to conclude and that they have to exchange pharmacovigilance information or pharmacovigilance data. So I would strongly recommend to conclude safety agreement in these procedures. However, you can't force the other marketing authorization holder to routinely exchange any safety data with you. So thank you for the question. And I have to say that it happened to me that we had common procedure, and we were in a role of CMS, and we wanted to cooperate with RMS. We wanted to have a common PCR, or we wanted them to collect the data and to do signal detection from the global safety database holder, etc. And the partner refused that. So we split our activities, and we didn't cooperate at all. And we were we separated our pharmacovigilance activities.
Thank you, Jana. Thank you very much, Marcela and Jana. Unfortunately, this is all the time we have for today. We'd like to answer everyone who has taken the time to answer a question, and so we will take the time to reply via email to all outstanding questions soon. This concludes our webinar session for today. We'd like to thank everyone once again for joining us. We hope you find this webinar useful. We are looking forward to receiving your feedback.